a wonderful presentation. I also love that we ended on that note with the Bean Queen. That what a fun, I guess, honorific title. So very cool. I'm sure we'll have time to take some questions from the audience, but I think a great way to continue the conversation would be if you want to share with us more about, beyond what you covered in the presentation, about your vision for the future of food.
Yeah, it's a great question, Ashley. So from my perspective, and really our perspective at Field and Farmer and the Fresh Factory, we believe that the future of food from a pure, food attribute standpoint is still in fresh, clean, and plant-based. And not only is it what consumers want, it's also what's most humane and environmentally friendly for our planet. But now with that being said, though, in terms of how consumers consume and how we actually go about doing it, I think that's where there's a lot of interesting sort of evolution in the next coming years. So I think as consumers, through COVID, through the lockdown, as well as kind of being spoiled with really good food, especially I would say in our country here, I think there's a demand for even tastier food, like restaurant quality food, but actually even more convenient, meaning that I want to eat like what I would have had at a restaurant, but I want it to be, I don't want to really spend a lot of time making it, right? So convenience becomes an even higher order benefit for all of us as consumers. And I definitely can relate to that on a day-to-day standpoint. So I think food as a service is something that is really interesting to think about as a company. If you're in food, like how can we actually give consumers these solutions that they want? So for us as Field and Farmer, instead of just providing, crave-worthy favorites such as a ranch dressing or a buffalo dip, what is that next evolution of a clean, fresh meal for them that they can get from a restaurant straight to their home? And what's really exciting to me about this is there's really, from a service standpoint, there's really no clear winner in fresh food today, which is why we're so excited at the Fresh Factory, because it is our mission to build the next platform of brands, but also of service to enable that.
Awesome. Yeah, I believe it was Hippocrates who said, let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. So obviously when you're here talking about fresh, functional, healthy foods, I think that's something that we don't do enough in North America. We arguably have one of the world's worst diets in the US compared to other countries. So I think it's so important that, to your point, there are these fresh, convenient, healthy options for people that want to fuel themselves the right way. What other than, these amazing suppliers that you're working with, and there's so many different moving pieces to a business, can you tell us a little bit more about what a surprising challenge might be in your current industry that you perhaps didn't anticipate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the things that really surprised me coming in to this role and this company, as I sought to, kind of figure out how do we actually become more sustainable as a company via recyclable packaging, or just even utilizing not only making it recyclable, but actually reusing recyclable packaging. It was actually really surprising to me that there is not only a lack of infrastructure available for that from a sourcing standpoint, but also a lack of transparency in terms of who you can source from and how you source it from. So I'll give you a little anecdote on this, an example. So one of the things that we were trying to do was actually source recyclable packaging in our plastic bottles, because obviously one of the key things is how do we actually extend the life of plastic when we do use them, right? So whether it's eliminating single use or actually utilizing recyclable in that sense. And one of the most fascinating and disappointing things that we found was one of the major suppliers that we had to work with was actually from China. So if you actually think about that, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of shipping materials over thousands of miles from a sustainability standpoint in order to then, in the States, on the state side, actually be able to say, okay, well, at least from a recyclability standpoint, our carbon footprint on this end is smaller. So that actually long-term just did not work for us because we couldn't, in our right mind, kind of justify that transportation impact that it would have on the world. So I think that still is a challenge. And it was a surprise because I think with a lot of companies, especially Fortune 500 companies, having these sustainability goals, it's surprising that the supply side has not caught up with it yet.
Definitely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, especially in this day and age. You would think that that wouldn't be so challenging. Since you mentioned packaging, recycled packaging, and sustainability, and you also touched on this, of course, within your presentation itself, can you talk a little bit more about how you laid the foundation for not only sustainability, but also diversity into your business practices and your business model?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the, I think, as I mentioned in the presentation, one of the key first steps in the foundation was actually just making sure that that's a key belief that you share from the start. So whether it's the founders, who kind of write that or kind of instill that, or just a team, a management team that does that. So I think that's absolutely key, because if you don't actually, as a team, decide what's important, you're not going to then actually know what to communicate. And in turn, no one's going to action upon that. So I think really it's a three-step process. It's decide what's important, communicate it, and action. So I think that really is the foundation. But then once you actually decide the what, defining your goals and metrics, what's important, it's then really figuring out, okay, the how. And for me, once you get that foundation, like, what's the goal for you as a company? So maybe it's carbon neutral in 3 to 5 years, right? The how piece, I think, becomes also equally challenging, given the infrastructure piece. So I think, but I think that's also the fun part of figuring it out once you have that foundation in place.
Awesome. Since you touched on this, what that might look like, let's say carbon neutrality in the next 3 to 5 years. And since we are on this topic, what do you think is the future of sustainability in business overall?
Yeah, so I think the future of sustainability, I think it's easy. It's kind of natural, I guess, for me to say from my standpoint, given that we are, a smaller company, is that it is going from just a single-minded individual or single company vision and mission to actually collective ownership across companies. I think that really is the future, because we can't possibly accomplish this as one small company, let alone one country. It is a global issue, and I think that is the future. But again, the devil's going to be in the details on like how we can actually collaborate and systemically change together to do this. So of course, I don't have all the answers, but I do think that is how we need to, as business leaders, need to start thinking about making an impact differently.
Awesome. Building on this further, this seems to be resonating with the audience. We have a follow-up question on this from the audience. How is your sustainability messaging impacting your choice of media mix, and what is resonating with your client, your target customers, your target audience?
Yeah. So from a media mix standpoint, I will say, because we are a small brand, 99% of our media is going to be within digital. But in terms of messaging mix, what I will say about that is, it's interesting what kind of David said earlier about the balance of purpose as well as product messaging. I think for us, how we think about it is, or how I think about it is, we're a food brand, which means we're extremely low consideration for the most part, right? Highly switchable, less loyalty than a clothing apparel type of a brand. So with that being said, from a messaging standpoint, first and foremost, if our product and our packaging is not screaming taste because we are food, then we failed, number one. And we absolutely need the product to win so that we can be profitable to fuel the investments we put behind purpose and sustainability. So from a messaging standpoint, for the most part, we actually treat those pretty discreetly, just so we're not kind of, we're keeping our messaging single-minded. So for example, on our Instagram or within our social media, we will for the most part, talk about our products as having crave-worthy flavors made from plants. And then we'll also on a monthly basis or a time relevant basis, talk about like an Earth Day, talk about the impact we've made, to date as a company in terms of using, saving however many ugly produce. However, I think in terms of then a digital media mix, right? Like I think on the website as well as within our email mix, that's where we can start to kind of intertwine and combine those two stories together because we've got more space and a more captive audience at that point.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Building on that further beyond sustainability, what other trends in e-commerce and retail are you most interested in?
This kind of goes back to your first question, Ashley, on the vision and future of food, and I mentioned food as a service. So I think that technology, technology meaning digital, enabling e-commerce in general, can actually enable many things for the consumer at the end of the day. What I'm actually most excited about is how e-commerce enables really companies to be able to deliver a food as a service. So I think a lot about brands like Daily Harvest, where you don't have the time, know-how, or interest in wanting to learn how to cook, so you can eat healthy, and it's the full solution to you, and you never have to actually cook, and you can still eat healthy. So I think that's really interesting in terms of being able to provide solutions really quickly and fresh solutions nonetheless. I also think about e-commerce with being able to connect you directly with the consumer more deeply, which actually, as a food brand, is very exciting because I mentioned just earlier that it's really difficult for a low consideration type of a category and a product to really deepen that relationship. And I think e-commerce has opened that up for us.
Awesome. Not to get controversial here, but given even the headline that we are all under here today, brands doing good, right? I wanted to dig into that a little more. And there has been a debate in the broader community, online, on LinkedIn, all over the place. Does doing good even matter at all in business?
That's a great question. And I think I'll offer my personal perspective on this one. So I think the answer that most people will expect me to say and will expect to hear is, yes, absolutely. That's what consumers expect. And I will say I agree with that half-heartedly. And the reason why I say that is because unless you as a company and as a people team are committed to actually executing the good that you aspire to do, you're better off as a brand and company not doing it and just focus on selling your product or service. So I say doing good matters if you truly are built like that from the inside and out and you're committed. But if not, then just own it, be transparent with yourself, I think most importantly, so that you can just own it and be happy with that with your consumers and retailers.
Touching on that about owning it, right? And also based on something you said earlier about the future of sustainability in business and that collective ownership, we did have a follow-up from the audience on that. Are you finding that brands in your space understand the importance of collective ownership?
I think it's a nice term right now. I think everyone will nod their head when we say, yes, this is a collective effort. Everyone needs to work together towards it. I think what everyone struggles with is really the how and who takes that first step. Is it really the big company's job? Is it the smaller company's job because they're built right from the start? So I think that's where I think it's still a nascent, nice thought that has still yet to be fully realized.
That makes sense to me. Hopefully that is the direction that we are all collectively moving in together, even if we're not quite there yet. We did have another question from the audience as well. More broadly, it seems about your marketing tactics and strategies. How are you balancing the importance of ROAS, your return on ad spend, and your brand metrics?
That's a great question. on objectives here. So I would say that for a brand our size, a bulk of our spend is actually not, it's not easy to measure ROAS. And it's not to say sales are important, because they absolutely are, especially, as we're trying to scale and build. But ultimately, what the main metric that I look at is actually if I can trial and repeat, which basically is a breakdown of velocity, is our in-store velocity. And to me, that's an indication of brand health, more so than the brand metrics piece. Because from a trial standpoint, what that validates for me is my proposition actually reaching the right audience, and is it attractive enough? And from a repeat, is my product actually delivering what I'm claiming, it is. So I think those two pieces is one that I look at obsessively to make sure that we are on the right track across the metrics. And the reason why, again, just to kind of go back to the question more specifically, the reason why I don't look at ROAS again more specifically is because I don't have those metrics for a lot of the efforts that I have, such as PR and some of the organic things that I do.
That makes a lot of sense. Since we have talked a little bit about audiences, we've talked a little bit about the collective will of the room, if you will. I'm also very curious more broadly about community. We are both over here at Hawke Media and on your side at Fresh Factory Field and Farmer. We're all part of Food Burrow, the Food Burrow community, for example. What would you say, participating in or being part of different communities, how does that help your business, if in any markable ways, whether it's Food Burrow or other communities? What are perhaps the key benefits for any other brands in business, and how might they benefit from seeking out that support network, perhaps strategic partnerships, et cetera?
Ashley, I really like how you kind of led the question with collective ownership, because that's exactly how I feel about running and operating this brand. This is a collective effort on behalf of all food brands, in my opinion, that we're trying to change the future of food and beverage. It is not just the Fresh Factory's mission. It is hundreds and thousands of food entrepreneurs and brands, and even Fortune 500 companies. So, we can't do it all alone, and we shouldn't be. And I find that actually being a part of specific communities, so whether it's Food Burrow, whether it's within LinkedIn, and whether it's a Facebook group, for example, that I'm a part of, it is actually hearing these stories amongst my fellow food cronies, if you will, that actually drive and motivate me, because I know that my impact, despite it being small in the grand scheme of things, is actually contributing towards a larger food movement.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. Is there an opportunity here? We do have some other brands in the room for further collaboration, perhaps. And if so, what would be the best way to approach a brand or business like yours to consider collaboration or to engage with you in that way?
Yeah, I am always open to collaborate and engage in conversation. So feel free to direct DM us on Instagram, find me on LinkedIn, or email me at isabella@fieldandfarmer.co.
Awesome. Since you mentioned Instagram, I'm very interested. There have been a lot of shifts across social media platforms, in particular in the last year, in vis-a-vis primarily a lot of the privacy motivated changes with app tracking transparency, which has led to a degradation in cookies and tracking and oftentimes personalization. This has primarily affected the paid output on social, but we all know that the social platforms behave differently across the board in demographics, just generally speaking. Which social platforms have you seen the most success on reaching your audience? It sounds like Instagram. Are there perhaps any other standouts?
Yeah, so I say Instagram because that's been the channel that we focused on most, and since the beginning as a company, even before I joined. So we've owned our own handle on Instagram for 4+ years before the rise of TikTok, as well as even I think LinkedIn becoming an even more social type of a platform. What I will say is Instagram is still great for engaging with your existing consumer base, and having a visually sort of, it's great for kind of communicating visually with your audience. But I will say, so I would say that that works in that sense. I will also say that LinkedIn is actually becoming more of a tool that we're trying to use. I will say we're not all the way there yet, but we're trying to use to actually engage more so from a industry standpoint, to share amongst peers, even retailers and consumers, even on Instagram, on what we are all about as a company. I think LinkedIn is a great way to actually tell our story, tell our purpose, more so than our website to a certain extent. So I think that's a key channel that we want to use more. And TikTok as well. We just started utilizing TikTok to reach the Gen Zs. My stepson has used it since over 4 years ago. I never understood it. So you won't be seeing me posting anything on there soon, although I'd love a challenge, I guess. But I will say that that's something that we know that people want to see who's who behind the company. They want to see the behind the scenes. And I think we've started to experiment there, and we've actually seen the most success from an engagement standpoint, and through actually organic shares on TikTok. So I don't think we've got it figured out in terms of magic formula, but I do think there's a lot of opportunity for us to engage our consumers there.
Awesome. Since we are talking about doing good today and giving back, and you did outline a lot of this in your presentation as well, can you tell us more about the donations that you all provide? I know that in your slides, you had mentioned 1%, where and how does the team determine where those go? Is it sort of a collective conversation you all have internally? Do you have existing partnerships with specific charities that you're working with? How does that process look?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of our other co-founder partners, Chris, she has been leading our Give Back program for the past few years. And she herself, we're based in Chicago, and the Chicagoland area. So we have, through the values and the pillars that I shared with you, she has, developed great relationships with a lot of local area charities, with the filters of, as I talk about food access, as I talk about land rights and things like that, with an emphasis on how can we actually first start with supporting our local backyard. So some of these organizations are things like supporting cruelty-free You and Me, which is a Chicago area nonprofit to give the underserved and under-resourced better access to food. So I would say, first and foremost, it's looking at under-leveraged, under-resourced areas in our backyard. I would also say that when it makes sense, such as things like supporting voting rights and things like that, of course, there are ongoing organizations that we continue to donate to, because there are just established ones that make sense for us. One of the first things that I kind of thought about and contemplated when I first came on was, do we just focus on doing one, like partner with one charity or two, right? Because that's definitely a lot easier to manage, and probably fewer logos we have to put on our website, and just fewer touch points. But at the end of the day, I think it makes sense for us as a company, given the pillars and the values and the organizations that we want to support.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Audience, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat now so that we can address them for you. I was very curious, we are coming up towards our time, so we do have a bit of time to take some questions from the audience as mentioned, but one thing I was also curious to know, beyond everything you shared with us today, are there any announcements or exciting news that you can maybe give us a sneak peek on?
So, we actually, one of the things that I mentioned earlier today was as I talked about the evolution of us as a field and farmer brand, we really tried to evolve our taste profile to be really anchored on America's favorites, like the ranch dressing. And as such, we've actually are releasing our optimized and updated ranch dressing and dip in time for National Ranch Day next week. We actually were a Nexty finalist with that new formula, so we're excited about that. We believe that it stands up next to Hidden Valley. We've also done the same with all of our dips in terms of elevating all of those products to make sure that it tastes as good as the real dairy version of those counterparts. And then also we're excited to share that next Sunday, the 13th, we're going to be part of the first ever virtual farmers market in the metaverse called the Meta Market. So please find me on LinkedIn or find us on LinkedIn or Instagram and come find out more details on how you can participate in that Meta Market next Sunday. There will be steep discounts. And I think more importantly, it's an interesting way to kind of learn how we can actually build experiences in the virtual world.
Yeah, definitely. That's a lot of fun. I think that is hosted by Parade, who's a mutual partner. So I will also go ahead and drop a link in the chat for anyone who wants to join us there. And obviously, it's another great way for them to engage with you and Fresh Factory and Field and Farmer. We are coming up close on time. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you think would be important for other brands to know who are here in the audience today?
Yeah, I think one of the I think one of the last things that I'll just mention here is that at the end of the day, doing good, even if starting out as a public benefits corporation or a B certified company wasn't how you were structured as a team or as a brand, I think I think there's still, like as even Davis mentioned in the earlier talk, there are still ways to actually go back and kind of rethink what your true values are as a company and see what actions you can take to slowly chip away at that. And all to say that, we believe it's a journey. As I mentioned, we're not yet utilizing fully recyclable packaging. We're not carbon neutral yet, but I think most importantly, it's important to be transparent and honest with yourself and with your consumers, and be okay with it as a company that it's going to be difficult, it will be costly, but you're doing it because you believe in your grander mission. And for us, it's about doing good in addition to actually enabling you to eat good.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense to me. Appreciate your time today and your thoughts and for being here with us. I hope everyone here got some great value from your insights.